All right, welcome to the Classic Cinema Society podcast. I forgot to write down a catchphrase for this episode. Yeah, see?
I was gonna say.
That's not even that's my Bogart impression. I'm going with that. I'm your host, Christopher Pistol. Every episode I bring on a guest to discuss the classic movie and we talk about its place in cinema history and how it holds up today. Today I'm joined by Philip Price and we're talking about In a Lonely Place from 1951, directed by Nicholas Ray. Thanks for joining me today, Philip. How are you doing?
Hey, good. No, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Surrounded by your wall of physical media.
I know. We had to represent for the physical media, people out there. So I always swore I wouldn't be like one of those people on YouTube sitting in front of my Blu-rays talking about movies. But here we are. You never know.
Yeah, I made a video not that long ago that was about physical media versus streaming, and I realized, while I was making it, I realized the irony of me making that video with a wall of Blu-rays behind me. So I just put up like my thumbnail was just like a fake Onion article that says like physical media still matters, says man, or streaming is dying, says man surrounded by wall of physical media.
Right. Yeah. No, it's important, right? That's what I tell myself every time I place an order. So
No, I was just gonna make another bad joke about there's got to be like a Black Mirror episode that's just like the remake of the Twilight Zone where the guy is surrounded by Blu-rays, but his like Blu-ray player then breaks or something like that.
So you're already outdoing me because my relationship with older movies, and so we'll make this the segue, I guess, because you're always on me about watching. I stay as up to date, like maybe the most up to date on all the new releases and everything, as I possibly can. But
Yes.
when it comes to the older stuff, you've always been like, you gotta go back further, and I'm like, how about this? And you're like, a little further, and so it's
I
you're
just
already
think it's good
Twilight
to
Zone.
have like, I just think it's good to have, like a balance, and to get
No,
like
you're
a
right.
really really wide scope of like not just where we are but where we've been. But you probably I admire how much you keep up with with new releases. You're probably the most caught up person I know in real life.
It's I don't know what it is, but it was just like starting like in 2000. I was like, I'm just gonna see everything. Yeah, like as a teen, and I just like never try to fall behind. But then if I do it by doing things that way, it's really bad because the only way I go back to watch older stuff is like if a legacy sequel comes along,
Right,
or if
yeah.
some remake comes along, or and I'm just like, oh, well, I got to see the source material. So
So in a way,
it's not
maybe it's good that the Hollywood keeps just rehashing stuff from the
in
because it gives you
sometimes.
an excuse to go back and check out that thing.
Yeah, it's the reason I saw Ben-Hur. You know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
yeah,
I think
but
I
hey,
think all of us like film nerds have like a little bit of like some kind of OCD thing in there, because for me it was like Letterbox. When I got Letterboxed, I was just
mhm,
like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to log every single movie I watch." And
right,
oh, there's like stats. So there's
hmm
like you can see how much of the lists you completed. Well, I got to complete some of these lists.
right, yeah.
just
No, it's
just getting
it's really
really
bad.
OCD about our movie habits. It's totally healthy, I'm sure.
Yeah, the way I am worried about like my grade distribution and how it looks with the four that are on the front page at any given time is concerning. I should not be as worried about it as I am, especially with the 10 people that look at my profile. But it's just I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's definitely some type of shared OCD there because I feel that too in a lot of different aspects.
Yeah, for sure. Our wives totally understand us though, so that's fine.
Right. Hey, folks, if you didn't know, Sly, there, we're married. It's fine. It's fine. We're
We're not
not
sitting
by
alone.
ourselves in this, sitting here. I'm not in
No,
a basement.
that was what my 20s were for, you know. I was single. I watched like 2 to 3 movies a day. It's totally
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah. See, now I have
I
to.
still
That's
found
why.
someone.
Yeah. See, mine is. So we're about to have our fourth child, but I still get
Congrats.
like, thank you, but it's just like, let me get that one night a week where I can go to the movies and just like I try to see like three. Sometimes I'll, if I can manage more, it's just like that's how I'll see all the new stuff. I'm just like, I'm gonna go, and then it's tougher, with all the streaming stuff, trying to stay on top of things. Even just like last weekend, there are
Mhm.
2 3 new streaming movies, and then 2 3 new theatrical releases, or at least ones here in our area where we're getting
Yeah.
some of the kind of slower rollout stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a
I'm just
challenge,
trying
and
to keep up with the horror stuff this month.
I,
There's been
I
so many
know,
horror movies this year. I've been trying to catch
yeah.
up with.
I had to make a list of all the streaming ones I wanted to watch, and I barely cracked it. And it's what, a week out from Halloween, and
Yeah.
yeah.
It's crunch
Oh,
time.
right now, yeah. Sorry, kind of pull the curtain back. We're recording this before Halloween.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Sorry. It's fine.
but yeah. Anyway, no, all of that to say, like, is the reason it's so hard to like. I try to find time for older movies, especially, I'll listen to a handful of movie podcasts as well, and listen, try to get recommendations or insights on cool ones I might not have even heard of prior to this, or
Mhm.
uh, you know, you and I probably watch a lot of special features on stuff, a lot of directors' commentaries, and they'll drop little,
Yeah.
reference points and everything in their commentaries for what, like, inspirations for whatever movie they're commenting on, and like, I'll make a mental note of those, and try to add them to the collection, if not actually watch them. And that's kind of what happened with this one, with In a Lonely Place. It was more about Nicholas Ray, and I had heard that name before, but didn't really know a lot about it. And then kind of heard that this was a good. I don't know if it was a good entry point or whatever, but it was kind of the subject matter interested that piqued
Mhm.
my interest when I heard what the movie was about. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's. So I'm glad you started this podcast so that you could compel me to finally get the DVD, the Blu-ray off my shelf and watch it. So I did it. Yeah, yeah. Here we
That's what this has all been about, Philip.
are.
That's
Right.
all it's been about. Not just you, but everyone I know.
Everyone. Yeah.
No, I think that's like the joy, honestly, for me of like going back and looking at old movies and discovering stuff that I'd never heard of before. I was thinking about this earlier today that last year Criterion put out these like all of these like pre-code horror movies, so like more horror movies from the 30s,
Okay.
stuff that I had never heard of before that I was just checking out, and there were so many good gems in there. I mean, so many great things to discover. So that's for me, that's like the joy of it, is just like to discover stuff that I'd never seen before and just go like, whoa, this movie's insane, why have I not heard of this before?
No, it really is, because even watching just this one, and is probably the oldest movie I've watched in a long time. Every Christmas we'll do It's a Wonderful Life or something like that, or we'll show the kids Wizard of Oz. They're our daughter, who's older, a little bit older, loves that one and has been watching it for years, and stuff like that. But just watching this one, and the way the people interact, and just the settings and everything, and it's just, I don't know. There's something about that that's really cool, and is kind of inspiring in a way to make me want to go, like, build the world out more, to see kind of what it looked like in more movies back then and things like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously this is a Bogart movie, so that old timey way of talking is fully in this one. But kind of just want to see more, and because I know when you and kind of Andrew Sweatman talked about the podcast episode you did with him, and kind of how modern that one felt, in terms of its kind of rom com aspects, and where it came out
Yeah.
with kind of inventing those genre conventions and everything. It was like, oh, like that was a podcast recommendation. I was like, oh, I need to go check this out, because I enjoyed the conversation around it. So yeah, no,
We
the work is working, I guess, is what I should say.
Cool. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Well, we know already a little bit about you. We know that you're, a film critic. You see all the new movies all the time. But tell us a little bit more about yourself and your kind of film journey.
Yeah, so I didn't watch a lot of movies as a kid, just because I'm the oldest child. My parents weren't super into movies or anything like that. My dad had like a 3 or 4 rotation that were his favorites and that he kind of stuck with. So I didn't really branch out of anything beyond like Disney and the kids. Was it the kids sports movies were a real big thing when we were little. It was very much in that stuff. And then as I got a little bit older, my aunts on my mom's side, just like going to the movies started to be a treat, and it was a big deal. And I don't know if it was just because the chaos of like home life, as far as, because I'm the oldest of 5, so there was always busy, always something to do, always somewhere to go, somewhere we had to be, and the movies was just kind of a nice, quiet place, like a place you could find some solace and stuff. And so it's still kind of that today. Now, honestly, now that
It's true.
and so it just started to be a place of comfort, and just started going all the time. And then once I could drive, I was going to the video store and renting a bunch of stuff, catching up on things. And that was the first place I went after I got my car and my driver's license, was was like the video store. And I rented like a big stack of DVDs, and just like I could go to my room, I could return them and get more. It was awesome. And just going to the movies on like discount Tuesdays and stuff. So I loved all that, and it just really built up. And I'd always loved to write, so watching more special features on those DVDs and everything, it kind of, you saw how screenwriting played into the whole process of it. And so decided to try out a film program for that. That's kind of where we met, in the film program in college and everything. And uh, yeah, I mean, I really just started writing from a critical perspective after I graduated. I started a website to try to just ensure that I wrote regularly and didn't kind of, lose that skill, or that skill that I'd kind of worked on for 4 years in college or whatever. And um, and then from that, it was able to kind of start some YouTube series. Kind of did a Siskel and Ebert inspired review show at some local movie theaters for a couple of years. It was fun. It was a good time. It continually evolved. We added skits, and those got more and more ridiculous and everything. And it
I
was
was
it
on
was
some of them.
you were, yeah, yeah. Go check them out. What was that last night in Soho?
Last Night in
Was probably the
Soho, yeah.
last one we did. Yeah, and you and Melody are on that one, or maybe
Mhm.
3,000 Years of Longing. I can't remember which was.
We did
I
we
guess
did both of
3,000.
those. I think
Yeah.
yeah, we did both of those, yeah.
No, it was a lot of fun, and really kind of resparked like uh, the filmmaking bug in me and everything. And so uh, just was like, after there was a shift in management at the theater we were doing it with, essentially. And so they said they weren't going to allow us to shoot inside their theater anymore, which was okay. um uh you know comes with the territory, I guess. But it was a good run, and I had a good time, and have definitely slowed in like the writing critically about movies, or making reviews, or making video reviews, obviously. But yeah, still watch as much as I can. Still love going to the movies as much as I can, and seeing as much as I can, because just like, I don't know, it just, like, kind of like I said earlier, in building out like, you know earlier times, years before, the current movies just kind of build out the current world for me as well, and offer other perspectives and ideas and insights and everything. So still enjoy it, and still love. I mean, I still try to watch something every day. So uh, but I need to make more of those, obviously older ones. So that's what we're kind of trying to start here. So I appreciate it.
Sweet. Well, I think we picked a good place to start. So, the movie we you chose to talk about is In a Lonely Place.
Mhm.
So let's talk about let's talk about a little bit why you chose this one. I think you told me a little bit about what intrigued you on that, but talk a little bit more about like why you wanted to delve into this one.
Yeah, so the first I remember hearing about it because I was listening to or watching a kind of Q&A with, I can't remember what it was around, what movie it was around, but it was actually with Josh Whedon. Sorry, I know we're not supposed to uh, whisper the
That's fine,
cancel
whatever.
name, but it was when he was not canceled. It was a long time ago. We're talking like what we got there. Yeah, right. So I think he was actually talking about how Nicholas Ray, how good he was at kind of playing out family dynamics and or just like um, relationship dynamics, not necessarily familial ones, but how good he was at that, and in particular in A Lonely Night, and how just how much of it was dialogue going back and forth, and how it slowly revealed like true characters of these people. It's not always what you perceive um, based on the facade and and all this kind of stuff. I can't remember exactly what how what got him onto the subject of it, but I was like, oh,
Mhm.
because I actually at the time I remember uh, I was trying to write like a feature screenplay about family dynamics and or that dealt with a particular family and an issue. It was a little melodramatic, but I was like, how do I not make this kind of feed into those like grand melodramatic swings that a lot of family dramas take and everything. And maybe it was in just kind of like looking for inspiration or doing research for that I stumbled upon that interview with him. But that was the first time I'd heard about In a Lonely Place. Obviously, I've heard of Bogart and like have seen Casablanca and know what Maltese Falcon and African Queen and all those, like I've heard of those titles. I've seen some of those because I did that was a good thing about film school, I guess, is it did get me to see a lot, a lot of those necessary ones. Um, but
Yeah.
uh, but I had never heard of In a Lonely Place, and I was like, oh, what's this? And that was and that was the first time I'd heard of Nicholas Ray as well. So I was like, oh, okay, this might be interesting. Saw it was on Criterion, went out and got it, and just never got around to it. And so here we
Sat on your
are.
shelf.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it did, and I've been meaning to get to it and wanted to get to it, but I just needed, a reason to really push me to do it, and so here we are. But yeah, and it was interesting too. I mean, I don't know if you want to get into like talking about the actual movie yet, or watching it or anything, but or how we felt watching it. But this was, yeah. So I know a lot of people who have been on the podcast have seen the movies before, and that's why they recommended them. But I recommended this because I wanted to see it. So this was my first viewing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, we can get into a little bit of the plot. For some reason, I thought that they had talked about this on You Must Remember This, and that was like a connection or
Oh, they
something.
might have. You told me about that
Okay,
podcast. And I think there was an episode about maybe Gloria Graham at some point. Uh,
probably. We'll
and
talk
that
a little bit about her.
Yeah, I bet. But yeah, so I feel like because there was, yeah, I think there was a series that dealt with like Hollywood blondes or something like that, and she might have been in
Hmm.
one of those episodes. So yeah, yeah,
I want to
that's
say they
true.
did like something on Bogart as well.
Oh, probably. Yeah, you're
Bogart and
right.
McCall.
Yeah. Yes,
Possibly.
yeah.
It could be anything. But anyway, we can go ahead and just talk about sort of the film a little bit. So the
Okay.
movie, it stars Humphrey Bogart. This is sort of like mid late Humphrey Bogart. So he
Yeah.
actually died in 1957, which I always forget that. I always forget that he died so early, or at least that he didn't get to have a Harrison Ford career, late stage
Right.
career. So he stars in this film as Dick Steele, which
Great name.
is not a romance novel protagonist. Um, he's a jaded Hollywood screenwriter looking for his next story. Kind of looking for
Mhm.
his next story. He's reading a novel. Actually, he's not even reading the novel.
Not
He's
even
been
reading the
assigned a
novel.
novel. He's assigned a novel. It's a trashy novel. He has no real interest in reading it. I really want to know if any Hollywood screenwriter has ever done this. One night, he basically like encounters a hat check girl who has read the book and really liked it, and says, "Look, why don't you just come over to my house and tell me the story?" And there may or may not be some alternative motives for him bringing
Yeah.
this girl back to his apartment. It sounds pretty risque, but it's fairly clear. Like after they get there and she's been talking a while, he's much more interested in the blonde girl that lives across the way,
Yeah, for sure.
and is like, yeah, yeah, kid, why don't you just like run home? Yeah, I'm not even gonna call a cab for you. Just walk down the corner and get you a cab.
Key point. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy that, gotta be, first of all, somebody who has just been like, summarize this for me. I don't care about the subplots.
Oh
Just tell
yeah,
me what I need to know. And then we'll
yeah.
play it off as like we were capturing the spirit of the novel rather than the
Oh
actual
yeah.
plot or something like
Now
that.
you probably don't even need a hat check girl. Now you just like need AI. You just like, say, hey ChatGPT, just write me a
Yeah.
synopsis of this novel real quick so that I can turn it into an outline for a screenplay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, shoot, it's like, I did it with Shakespeare plays, I'm sure. I just checked
Hmm.
Wikipedia and, wrote papers about that in high school. Um,
So anyway, after the head check girl leaves his house, she's mysteriously murdered, as we find out the next morning when Dix is being brought in, being
mhm,
questioned. Seems very nonplussed when he's told this and is being
yeah.
questioned by the police. Like, hey, you're the last person that saw her, and everyone knows that you have a violent temper. And we find out that he has a history of assault, history of alcohol abuse, um, but he's a screenwriter of murder stories, so he seems pretty comfortable like making jokes about this, really, poor woman's demise. I was watching this with my wife, and she was just like kind of like taken aback by the sort of like
I was too.
nonchalant nature at which we're discovered that this woman has been not just murdered but thrown in a ditch,
Right. Yeah.
essentially.
Mugged and, yeah.
Yeah.
And just discarded. Yeah. And it's crazy because they bring in the neighbor, the blonde, who Gloria Graham plays. And
Laurel.
he immediately is just like, it's so clear, it's so evident that he is more taken with the fact that she likes his face, which is something she says, than he is about any details having to do with the hat check girls, um murder, his involvement with it. Like, obviously these guys are suspicious. I had to also, side note real quick, I had to look
Yeah.
who the with the police chief. There was a second there where, when he's talking to Bogart, and he sounded just like Robert Stack, the guy in the
I
Unsolved
said the
Mystery.
exact same thing. I said the
I
exact same thing
had
to
to
my
go
wife.
check if he was
And I
Robert
was like,
Stack.
"That's not Robert Stack," but he definitely sounds like Robert Stack.
So much like him, like the inflection on like two of those words. I was like, "Holy cow!" It was crazy. Glad you picked that up too, because I was like, when
Frank
I realized,
Lovejoy.
yeah, not Frank Stack, not Frank Stack. Uh, Disappointing, but he sounded just like him. Anyway, yeah, it was just like and it's funny too because that kind of the attitude he has towards the murder and how it shifts immediately, his attention and just desire or just whatever immediately shifts to Graham's character is kind of uh symbolic of the movie and or the movie in a way, because I kind of went in once he's questioned. I was like, oh, this is going to be kind of a murder mystery thing, and like we're going to have to figure out, there's going to be, we're going to figure out if he's really the murderer or not, or if he just hides it well, because he's so calm, cool, collected kind of thing. But
Mhm.
after that, it really kind of does away with that whole angle, and we just kind of go on the chronicling of their relationship journey in a way. And it kind of, it
Yeah,
comes back around, but it's not, the movie isn't really concerned with, you know who the actual murderer is.
right. Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting aspect of this film is that, they begin so Laurel and Dix begin this romance,
Hmm.
which I think also, you can read in a lot about the fact that she falls in love with this guy whom is like number one suspect in a murder that she saw.
Yeah.
That she saw her leave, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't kill her later. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the fact that she's just willing to disregard this is pretty fascinating, and falls in love with him. And it kind of becomes it kind of plays both, that she becomes more suspicious or more doubtful of his innocence as the film goes on, as
Right.
she kind of learns that of his how violent his temper can be, and how like fascinated with murder he seems to be. Um, but at a certain at a certain point, and we can kind of we'll get into this about the ending, and I think we're gonna have to kind of spoil this movie, I think, to
Yeah.
get into the talk about the ending. But it doesn't really matter by the end of it, like if you, the murder has become irrelevant. The murder has become not the point. The point has become, is he capable of it or not? It's not did
Right.
he do it, it's is he capable of it.
Yeah.
And we definitely get an answer. So
Right.
yeah, this is why you should just never date your neighbors. Is what is
It's
my main takeaway from this. So the two start up this very noir dangerous romance. I mean, the dialogue between them I think is fantastic. Um,
yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
uh, and he starts writing again. So this sort of like romance kind of like fuels him to put the bottle away and
Yeah.
to focus on writing his screenplay. And we get that fantastic scene. I think this is my favorite scene in the movie. Um, where he goes over to his friend's house, and they're sort of discussing the murder, and he kind of like
Oh yeah.
because he is a screenwriter and he has become so familiar with through screenwriting with what people do and what actions they take, he feels like he knows exactly how this murder happened. um, so he kind of like has them sort of like recreate this murder, and he's like narrating the scene, and you can tell that the wife of the guy who's they're over there with is getting more and more uncomfortable
Right.
as they sort of progress, and he's lit so menacingly. A lot of ways that we can go into this, that this is a definitely like a film noir, that this is like a film that kind of checks a lot of boxes when we talk about the style or the influence of film noir, but it also feels like a monster movie. It almost feels like we are like seeing this person sort of like layers fall away, or we're seeing a different side of this person, like a sort of like Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely was kind of because it does shock you, just like how flippant he is in that initial police interview, and you're like, oh, okay,
Hmm.
this, and I mean, obviously, very intently from the beginning, the opening scene, it shows that when he's yelling at the guy in the car next to him, and then at the bar right after, and he gets into a fight, like they're both interactions go from 90, nothing, or they take off really quickly, and it just escalates, and you can tell, he's got a hot temper. That's very clear and everything, and but yeah, it just, it also kind of becomes uh it's just like, I don't know what, it's obvious the movie itself, I guess, is as a whole is kind of about how uh, this guy who obviously has a lot of feelings, obviously communicates them best when he's writing them down and everything, and has a like merit to, or wants to have a merit to his work. Like he calls the guy at the bar the first time like a popcorn salesman or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So he's obviously like holds himself to a pretty high standard in terms of his art and his output and everything, and just him trying to function within, um, the system that he's caught up in, and it's just a lot of like internal struggle that he's dealing with, and it just finds these outlets, these bursts where he just like lets it all out. And she kind of, Laurel comes in and soothes a lot of that over, like
yeah,
he kind of, I don't know if he necessarily finds a muse in her, but it's, I mean, an inspiration, I guess is fair to say, for sure, because he gets to, he starts writing a lot more than he was, and it's just, yeah, I don't know, it's cool. I liked it. I'm always, it's always weird because I was it always feels like so many of the older movies are movies about people in Hollywood, and I guess like the obvious
yeah.
example that is Singing in the Rain or something like that, or a lot of
Right.
those musicals from that time are about people putting on musicals, or mounting, filmed musicals or
Mhm.
things like that, or shows. Um, you
Sunset
know,
Boulevard is probably like the biggest
yeah,
like counterpoint to this, or movie that
yeah,
goes
like
that pairs well with this as far as exploring the very similar themes.
yeah, and it was, and so I was just like, oh, okay, so we're dealing with kind of a, you know, interior movie as far as like Hollywood exploring Hollywood, but I don't know. It was just more specifically it being about a writer, which, uh, you know, I like to think of myself as a writer, even though I don't, necessarily haven't published anything or written anything that's been published. But it was interesting getting into that mindset, I guess, and kind of seeing uh, how he would see the world. He said one line, I can't. Oh my gosh, where did I put it? Like, most writers think they're mind readers, and I don't know. It just was like he had a couple like that throughout, and I liked that he would
Yeah.
just get like try out dialogue on people and things like that, which made for some great lines that I jotted down as well. But just like little insights like that were really not just telling, but also kind of like very informative uh, on where this was going to go. So I don't know. I thought it
Yeah.
was, yeah,
There's
ultimately a really fascinating character study, I guess.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a great character study. Like you were saying, there's this metatextual element to the film,
Yeah.
where he is as he is sort of like exploring or getting back into writing, he's sort of like he's exploring that sort of like process of it. And there's the scene where he and Laurel are in the kitchen and she's become kind of disturbed by his outbursts, and she's
Hmm.
become more and more suspicious of him. And he's sort of describing like he says like the best love scenes are not or about something else, like this scene right now where you're cutting up grapefruit and I'm sitting here talking to
Right.
you.
Yeah.
So there is this metatextual element to the film. Also the scene that we talked about where he's describing the murder and he's sort of like making these analogies to the fact that he's written so many scenes of murder. But yeah, this is a very sort of darkly look at the creative process, um,
Yeah.
and it's interesting, like you said, that so many films that have really stood the test of time or that have become gone on to become like mainstay classics are about Hollywood. We've got
Right.
Sunset Boulevard, like you said, Singing in the Rain. Um, so many movies that I think dare to like they're a part of the studio system that dare to like look inward.
Right.
One
Yeah.
of the
That's
last
exactly
ones
what I was about.
are literally the last movie that we just talked about on this podcast. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is very much about the same thing. Uh, this sort of like looking inward, and really dissecting the sort of problems or the darkness inherent sort of in that situation. Um,
Well, and I mean that makes sense too because I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but Nick Ray was married to Gloria Graham, and like this was, they I think separated. It sounds like during the making of
yes.
this, or they had separated, and no one knew other than them. I guess is what it sounds like just from some of the interviews that I listened to and reading that I did and
Hmm.
everything. But I guess you couldn't. They were very professional about it. I guess it sounded like, but the big kind of like story that
Movies got to
seemed
get
to,
made.
yeah, well, and it just the one that kind of kept popping up as I was like reading more and more about the context of this movie, and kind of where everybody was at, like all these key players in their lives and everything, and where they were at and what they were doing, uh, is just that wasn't the original ending, and that they had to
Mm.
rewrite it.
Yeah, Gloria Graham, has a fascinating story. I mean, she won an Oscar a year after this, so
Okay,
she still had like a pretty thriving career. I mean, she's in It's a Wonderful Life.
right, yeah,
She
I was
plays
gonna say,
Violet. So more people are probably familiar with her than they realize. But originally, it was going to be Lauren Bacall playing this
mhm.
part, which would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Because Bogey and Bacall are so sort of synonymous with each other. I even have
Right.
right on the desk here something I meant to look at, but I didn't get around to it. I have a VHS of a
Oh, man.
documentary called Bacall on Bogart that I think I found at a Goodwill a long time
Yeah, you
ago.
do.
I like picking up random stuff like this.
So I haven't seen a lot of the movies, obviously, that they starred in together. I say obviously,
Hmm.
sorry, but
That's fine.
were did their like collaborations tend to be more uh like playful or lighthearted than something like this,
Yes.
or is that why it would have been interesting to see
Yeah,
the
I
two
would
of
say
them?
so. Even in The Big Sleep, which is she's kind of starts off as a little bit of a femme fatale. Their relationship is always usually um less fraught than this one is. However, supposedly that they're in real life though their relationship was a bit fraught, but I think that also
Yeah,
goes into the fact that Bogart really did have a temper, allegedly,
right.
and really did have some demons, in the form of alcohol as well. Um,
Yeah,
so it's interesting that he picks this script, and sort of like produces it with his own, or puts his own sort of money behind it. It's
huh.
interesting that this is a character he really goes after and wants to play and wants to put on screen. Um,
Yeah. I mean, because he didn't know at this. I mean, I know you said earlier this is like 6 years before he passes away, but he
mhm.
wasn't like old. He wasn't too much older, not to the point that he would have been considering like necessarily his mortality with every role or anything like that. It was, I mean, sure, sure. I mean, I guess you'd pick some to be kind of to look inward or to be kind of a reflection of your own struggles or whatever. And it's I don't know, or I don't know, maybe you avoid that, but he wasn't necessarily like peering into peering into that point of life just yet. Would you
No, I don't.
say?
I don't think so, but I think there's also an element of him being aware of his own persona on screen and wanting
Okay.
to challenge it. So wanting to take a
Yeah.
darker role that goes against a little bit more of what he's sort of known for. Um, I mean, even like one of his like later films, The African Queen, with Katharine Hepburn, is kind of a different movie for him. I mean, it's definitely a different role for him. He plays much more of like a blue collar type person. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think he was always, even in later into his career, looking for challenging, more interesting roles, sort of like go up against that movie star persona that I think he's, you know, probably more well known for at this point.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay.
But
Okay.
Nicholas Ray is also, I think, an interesting element to him. Um, we talked a little bit about Nicholas Ray and his relationship with Gloria Graham, which was fraught during this production. Supposedly, he walked in on her in bed with his 13-year-old son.
I read
That's a
that. I
thing.
was going to say that's a crazy twist.
That that's a crazy
Uh,
twist.
that
Nicholas Ray, also one of the one of like the old studio directors that had an eye patch. I don't know what it was with studio directors having eye patches back then. It's just him and John Ford being
yeah.
pirates. I don't know. I asked
On
my
the
film professor about that once, and he said, like, man, World War II, just crazy. I don't know.
just really got to. I know. I was watching the special features on the Blu-ray of In a Lonely Place, and like, there's one, and a lot of the pictures of Ray and everything are just normal look, normal guy of the time. And then there's like this documentary from I'm maybe 59 or something like that, full eye
Hmm.
patch, like
Yeah,
maybe a couple teeth missing. I can't say
he's
for sure,
actually
but
he's actually in a film from the '70s called The American Friend, and it was directed by Wim Wenders, and it's kind of an adaptation
oh,
of
okay.
the Tom Ripley character.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, he's got an interesting little part in that movie too, which that's a very strange movie, but very, very cool.
Oh,
Um,
what's the title of
yeah,
that
it's
one?
interesting. The American Friend.
The American Friend. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna add it to the watch list. See, it just keeps expanding.
There's a Criterion Blu-ray. Um,
Oh, sucker for
but yeah,
those.
for me, for me also, I think Nicholas Ray is just one of the like best, most interesting directors of the '50s. Him and
Mhm.
Billy Wilder, I think, are like at least in the top five. Uh, he does Rebel Without a Cause. After this, he does Johnny
Right.
Guitar. I've mentioned Johnny Guitar before on the podcast, but that's like a just a really interesting, um, subversive movie. Rebel Without a Cause has its own subversive elements. So he's really just like kind of one of these like studio directors who's just like making these sneaky movies of putting these very like sort of taboo and subversive elements in there. Um,
Yeah, because
Johnny
honestly, like,
Guitars, Johnny Guitar is very much about the blacklist as well. But sorry, what
oh,
were you
really?
saying?
No, I was just gonna say, kind of going off what we were talking about earlier about Hollywood making so many movies about Hollywood at this time. I guess I kind of have, I place a stigma on a lot of the older movies, and I'm just like, there's so much in this bubble, and it's hard for me to like get into a lot of them that don't kind of break out of that bubble and into a more
Hmm.
grounded reality. But like this one kind of had the best of both worlds in that it was very grounded, was very uh did feel very low key. I mean, it's not extravagant. There aren't, it's almost a single location movie except for, a couple
Yeah.
scenes. They're largely in uh in those apartments and everything, which is
Hmm.
apparently where Nicholas Ray lived when he first moved to LA as
Yeah.
well.
And
So
where he
uh
moved back to when him and Gloria Graham split.
yeah, so this one clearly, yeah, this one runs deep for him, obviously. Like, uh,
Hmm.
so it's interesting that like both of the director and the star of it like found so much, I guess, like to mine in the script because I don't did Ray have a hand in the screenplay on this or was it something they both kind of found?
I don't think so. I can't remember who
That's
did the
interesting.
screenplay, but this was based on a book.
Oh,
Um,
that's right. That's right. I do. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and we were talking about the ending being kind of one of the like you know like headlines about this every time I would try to find context around the movie, and it essentially kind of originally being and maybe it's the book ending as well wrapped up in a neat bow and kind of everything
Right.
settled. Uh, but this one, I don't know if now's the time when you want to get to that, but it definitely goes a little. Um, in the unexpected way. Like not necessarily, I don't even know if it was
Yeah.
unexpected. Yeah. It felt honest in a way, which I guess wasn't as common,
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like it's almost more of a like film noir trope if the original ending happens. And what the original ending was that they have this sort of big argument where things escalate. His anger escalates. He finds out that she's planning on leaving him. Um,
Hmm.
he basically like starts to strangle her. In the original ending, he finally just succumbs to his rage and kills her. And then the police show up and take him away. After we find out, of course, that he did not kill the Hatchet girl.
Yeah.
So it's kind of become this like tragic, self fulfilling prophecy of him finally becoming the murderer he was suspected of being.
Right.
But that feels more like the film noir cliche, and what actually happens almost feels like more true to the film noir spirit, which is he does not kill her. He manages to stop himself, and then he gets the phone call that finds out that they caught the killer. So the audience and Gloria Graham find out both that he definitely did not kill the hat check girl,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter because
No.
we have already seen him go too far.
Yeah.
Like the line has been crossed. Their relationship is ruined. They both know it, and he basically like he even says to on the phone, or she says to I think she says to the detective on the phone, like, if you had told me this a week ago, it would have been the best news of my life, but
Right. Yeah. That's
it's
right.
too late
So,
now. And
yeah.
they both know it, and he basically like leaves her and walks away.
Yeah.
And what I assume will happen is a very awkward moving out of one of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
apartment complex.
That's yeah. Oh, that's true, man. No, I would be peeking out the blind.
But yeah,
Like,
it's a very like morally gray, very dark. It's much more like inwardly dark. I feel like the ending. that we get the sort of death of this relationship. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's also like an element that Nicholas Ray probably brought to it. I can't remember if they said exactly whose decision it was to change the ending, um, but
I
that
well,
definitely
I
feels like more.
It sounded like from what it's like that they had separated, that Nicholas Ray and Gloria Graham had separated, and that they didn't want the studio to find out because he wanted her to stay on. They wouldn't let them work together if they knew there was trouble in
Mm,
their relationship or whatever. But uh, he wasn't going to their house at night and was asking to just stay in on the set in one of those apartments because he wanted to work late and rewrite, um because he said the ending wasn't working for him. So initially it might have started out as just kind of like a small ruse to get, so they
that's
didn't have
funny.
to stay together. But by the end of it, it was like, oh, this ending really isn't working for me. And how much, uh I mean, because it sounds like it was so closely mirroring.
Mhm.
Obviously don't know Nicholas Ray's temper and temperament, and why their relationship had the ups and downs that it did, but it uh,
If I
it
were to
sounded
judge
like it.
someone based on their eye patch, I might guess that they're
So
that they're slightly unhinged as well.
yeah, no, I mean, you get that. I mean, the vibes are there in the interviews for sure, but it's just, I don't know. It was, yeah, he's a little neurotic, I guess. Violent temper, possibly. We'll see. Um,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, I think the ending really elevates the movie. I think if this movie ends the original way, it kind of is like more of a, typical sort of like noir and has this
yeah,
sort of maybe like typical kind of, thriller ending,
hmm
that you kind of go like, ah, yes. But the way it ends now, I think makes it so much more messy and so much in a good way, like so much more gray and so much more like emotions to sort of sift through.
yeah. Yeah, because he's a guy that like already feel, by virtue of being a writer, I guess he has a inherent sense of like feels an inherent sense of alienation from a lot of people, and when he does try to communicate with them, obviously he doesn't do it well, and to the point that he just blows up and fights with people. But by the end of this, how much further, when it could have so easily been the opposite, he's just so much further alienated himself instead, and really has nothing to
Yeah.
like show for it. It's super depressing, and it's I guess I was surprised because I do throw my own stigmas at older movies and stuff, and I think I know what to expect, but I didn't really, like I said, like I the setup within the first 15-20 minutes, I expected this to be one thing, and it just completely
Yeah.
does a U-turn and goes in another direction. And I don't know if it was just that first time viewing and it took me by surprise in the direction that it went, and that it ended up being just like, watching this couple's relationship both bloom, and like, while at the same time it was blooming, you could already see what it was about this guy that was going to cause it to fall apart at the same time, simultaneously. Like what made him so intriguing and mysterious and charming in the first place is what would also cause, like, you know the end of it, once those characteristics, those facets went up a couple levels. Yeah, it was just really, and a lot of that has to do with the performances, obviously, but yeah, the writing. And
Mhm.
then um, just yeah, I don't mind watching a black and white movie. I don't mind watching a silent movie. I've watched plenty of them, and I think those are like the top two stigmas people place on watching old movies. But that's not been the obstacle for me. Like the more the obstacle is just like, um, I guess, like trying to relate to people of a completely different time, and because I don't
Yeah.
understand the circumstances or the context in which the movie was made or came to light, I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm missing something, and so
Right.
it's like an extra layer of research in order to get the full picture, not just
Yeah.
simply sitting down and watching the movie. So no, I mean, it was
Yeah.
very enlightening, but also kind of proved that it proved it right and wrong in a way, because I did do a lot of reading around it to understand not just where the movie came from, but where these actors and creators were
Mhm.
at in their lives when making this movie.
I say teaching film appreciation uh is that's like the number one challenge as far as like trying to like get kids to accept old movies, you know, or just like understand old movies,
Yeah,
is trying to give them that context, because some of them will just write off old stuff just, you know, completely from the beginning. But yeah,
yeah,
it's understanding that context. But yeah, I think it also is these more interesting movies that eventually rise up to the surface. You know, I think that's what the
mhm,
Criterion Collection does really great job at, is finding these
yeah,
movies that um, that are older but still are relevant. And I think that kind of leads into my sort of next question, or my sort of final question is, you know, why do you think that this movie is still important today? And why would you, you know, like pitch this to people who may not be familiar with it or may not watch like old movies a lot?
yeah. You know, I hadn't really thought about this one yet in terms of its relevancy, because it was more of just kind of a peek into the past for me. But it is it. I mean, the kind of what it is the flip side of the coin of like you're singing in the rains, or like uh white Christmases and stuff like that, where it's like, you know, within the system and how we mount these big colorful showy things with
Yeah.
dance sequences and all that, and the glam and the glitter,
Yeah.
and
Which
then this
those almost have their own sort of appeal on that level. You know, like that's almost
oh
what you
for sure,
that's what you come for. You come for the
yeah,
kitsch and the fantasy of it all.
yeah, and I love those. Like, don't get me wrong, like I'd watch Singing in the Rain every day and not have a problem with it. But like uh the this being the being the flip side of it, and being just like, you know, I kind of said it with um it was Babylon, the Chazelle movie from a couple of years
Yeah.
ago. You know, a lot of people didn't like it because it was like the ugliness that happens behind the scenes is what was showed, instead of the like the pretty uh, stuff that you know, all the ugly work that it takes to put something so pretty on screen. And this is kind of a peek at that as well. Like, this is all the ugly stuff someone has to go through in order to get words on a page, you know, to eventually get it on the screen. And I don't know. It's kind of a harder sell in that way, like to pitch to people like, hey, you want to, you know, you want to feel a real downer for 90 minutes. Like, this one's got some really great dialogue.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a, I think I would probably, if I were to position it to somebody, would be to see maybe a different facet of Bogart, and like something that both plays on his persona, as well as like giving it a couple more layers, and or giving that persona more layers, I guess would be the way to put it. Um,
Yeah.
but as far as what was the first part of the question, how it why it remains relevant today?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Why is this movie still important today?
I mean, I I don't know exactly. I don't know what it is. Honestly, like I don't know what it
Yeah.
is about this one that kind of has, because I feel like it has gained a little traction in the last 10 to 15 years or so, in terms of like relevancy in Bogart's filmography, especially. Um, but it's, you know, I mean, there are obviously like the things we were talking about, like artists being powerless within the Hollywood system, that kind of feeling of alienation from society, people struggling with inner demons, like those kind of themes and ideas are always going to be relevant. And even it just to even if it was simply just to see that like this stuff was still happening, you know, 75 years ago at this point, uh, you know, that's kind of both depressing and reassuring in a way. Like, there's always
Yeah.
going to be some kind of you know, system in place that's going to make you feel like it's stripping you of your creativity or your you know, natural instincts or inclinations. But also you know, the uh, the power dynamics of a couple, the male female dynamics that it represents here, and everything. I found those extremely interesting, and thought it was uh, you know, kind of fascinating that Bogart is definitely like portraying this man of his time and everything.
Hmm.
But as a writer, as someone who isn't afraid to show a more sentimental, vulnerable side. Um,
Yeah.
the way he showed that in certain parts of their relationship, even if it's just describing what the relationship could or should be. Um, I thought that was interesting too, as given what we think of gender roles at that time, and how they've evolved to what they are today.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, the dynamics of their relationship, I think that still holds up today. I mean, I don't think this movie glamorizes or romanticizes abuse.
Well, yeah,
And there's even that one scene where his agent is sort of explaining to Gloria Graham like yeah, he's just, he's always been this way. He's he's got a temper, and that to change that would be like trying to change the color of his eyes or whatever. And it's just like you can just feel the hollowness which with those arguments, are landing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. His agent was
so
killing me.
yeah.
It
But
was
yeah,
great.
I mean there definitely is like some stuff that's like very old Hollywood and very old movie. I was like smiling during the beach scene where it's clearly like on a set
Yeah.
with the
Yes.
sand in the foreground and then just
Right.
like a projector screen of the ocean in the background.
Yeah.
That's something you just kind of have to like go with, I think, because
Yeah.
these movies, these movies from especially the 50s and back have a sort of like synthetic quality to them that people just kind of accepted it, and like it wasn't like people thought it was super realistic, in 1951. It was just sort of the syntheticness of Hollywood that I think um people are less used to now than they were back then. People just, I think, like were much more used to, it's like going to a play. When you go to a play, and there's like a cityscape background,
Right.
nobody leaves the play because they're
Yeah.
like, I just don't believe that city. I just don't think it looks real.
No,
So,
I think it's come
they're
back around, and that's part of the charm of it now.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it was there, but it was like, oh, great, yeah, no, like it was very obvious, but I enjoyed it.
yeah,
Again, the movie making in and of itself has evolved so much too. Like you worry that your kind of modern sensibilities are going to hinder, the more stationary, still long shots of dialogue, like the majority that make up this movie. But I'm, you know, it just, I was 5 minutes in, I completely accepted it. And it was just, I just went with it and was, more in tune with, following the characters than I was necessarily wrapped up in the filmmaking of it, which is always a good sign. But no, I really enjoyed it. I definitely, need to watch a couple more Nicholas Ray and fill out that a little bit, and then obviously just more older movies in general. So I appreciate you.
sure. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, but thanks for making me do this also.
You're very welcome. Yeah, if you're looking for more Nicholas Ray, I've already on this podcast recommended Johnny Guitar. Hopefully, will be one
Took
we
note of
talk
that
about at
one.
some point in the future. Maybe I'll have you on and we can talk about that one. Maybe.
Ooh,
Um,
yeah, sort of series.
Bogart. If you want more Bogart, I'm a big fan of Treasure of Sierra Madre. It's one
Okay,
of Paul Thomas Anderson's favorite movies as well, and a big influence on There Will Be Blood.
okay,
Um,
and that was
that's
like right
a,
before this one, huh? So it's
I
kind of
think
around the
so.
same. Yeah.
I think it's like late 40s.
Okay.
I could be wrong,
Yeah, I
but
haven't seen that one. I haven't seen that one, so
super
I'll have
great.
to do that.
Bogart
I'll have to-
also super dark in that one.
Okay, good to know. Good. I got my
All
next two
right.
lined up.
All right. Well, we love old movies, and I'm sure you do too if you're listening to this. You can reach out to us at classiccinemasocietypod@gmail.com. Please let us know what you thought of this movie, or if you haven't yet but curious, check it out. I'm sorry we spoiled it, but kind of had to. I'm sure it's still good. Philip, is there anything you'd like to promote before you head out?
No, not really. I'm just here, just watching
You
some
still
movies.
write though. You still have a website.
Yeah, it's there. I post every now and then if I feel compelled to go long, but other than that, just check out my letterbox, follow me on there. I
There you
log
go.
everything on there and try to write a little something for each movie I see.
Yeah.
But
You post some long,
don't go.
long, nicely written reviews sometimes.
Yeah, it just varies, Sometimes it's a quote, sometimes it gets rolling, and it's just, we end up with three
Right.
paragraphs. But hey, yeah, no, follow me on Letterboxd, Philip Vandy Price. So that's where I'm mainly
I
at
do
these
like
days.
your signature of including a quote before the
Oh yeah,
review, because
try to pick
sometimes I'm
one.
like, oh, sometimes I'm guessing, I'm like, I wonder which quote he picked, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't remember that quote.
I try to find one that like sneakily applies to the movie as a whole, as well as
Yeah,
just like something they threw in.
instead of
Like I
like, hey,
saw,
hand me that banana.
yeah, right. um, was that I saw the Andrew Garfield Florence Pugh movie last night. We
Oh,
Live in
okay.
Time, and
Hmm.
so I haven't posted it yet, but let me see. I can tell you, obviously that movie, John Crowley, loved Brooklyn. This one is supposed to be very like sentimental. Like A24 was giving out tissues at the premiere of it, right? So the quote for that one,
You will cry.
yeah, basically. So, but a character in that movie says, "Don't be so fucking sentimental." So that's the quote at the top of that one. So
Nice.
yeah, no, thank you for clocking that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, well, make sure to subscribe and share this podcast. One of the best ways to help us is to leave us a 5-star review. It's really the best way to help us reach more classic cinema nerds like you. Thanks for listening.